Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod. I'm CNBC producer Cameron Costa, and on today's episode, the great one, Wayne Gretzky, hockey legend and holder of dozens of NHL records, preparing to congratulate a player set to beat his career goal record.
He said, just remember one day when somebody breaks your record, you have the same dignity as Gordie Howe. And I remember I looked at my dad and I said, well, can I enjoy this for just a couple days?
And Bitcoin is cruising toward 100K. Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis is a crypto enthusiast. She's pushing for a Bitcoin reserve.
Bitcoin is a commodity, so it's a lot like cattle. I own cattle, and yet nobody wants me to divest, thank God, of my cattle.
Plus, Nvidia's strong quarter, Google's potential breakup, and the new cabinet taking shape. Who will be the new Treasury Secretary? Punchbowl News co-founder Jake Sherman runs through the contenders.
He needs to find somebody that is easily confirmable.
It's Thursday, November 21st. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
We are creeping very close to $100,000 for Bitcoin. It is now breaking records. The cryptocurrency topping $97,000. It's in the $98,000 category just a little bit before there. $97,803. Bitcoin now up 40% since Donald Trump won office and was elected just now a couple of weeks ago, and has gained about 160% in the past year alone. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming will join us 8:10 a.m.
Lummis.
So, Lummis, I apologize.
Where's it Lummis? I think it is Lummis.
It rhymes with hummus, right?
Yeah, I think it rhymes with hummus.
So then I got it right.
No, you said Lummis.
I get everything wrong.
No, I think it is.
She puts out hummus.
It is not like the guy, it's not like
Carol
Dr.
Lummis.
Lummis.
I always think of Carol Lummis, but
I
this
think of
is
Dr. Lummis, the guy who was chasing Michael Myers his entire career. Shares of Nvidia losing some ground this morning. The AI chip maker's profits and revenue beat estimates. Sales nearly doubled in the quarter. The company also had positive guidance and expects sales of, this is a big number, $37.5 billion in the current quarter versus estimates of $37.1. But the company's sales projections didn't meet the highest expectations, and we see the stock under some pressure. It is the most valuable company on the planet, though. CEO Jensen Huang on the company's call last night.
We'll ship more Blackwells next quarter than this, and we'll ship more Blackwells the quarter after that than our first quarter. And so that kind of puts it in perspective. We are really at the beginnings of two fundamental shifts in computing that is really quite significant.
This was really, I mean, if you look at what happened last quarter to the stock, it was a similar situation where they beat expectations but didn't beat maybe the very highest expectations. The stock was down initially on that, but since then it's up 17%. If you're looking at the year to date, it's up by more than 185%. A pullback of 2.6% doesn't strike me as being a big deal on any of this, and I wouldn't read too much into it. I have heard people saying, well, they couldn't keep up with demand. That sounds like the type of problem I would like to have. Yep. But we'll see.
The United Kingdom's competition regulator now will soon announce behavioral remedies to address anti-competitive practices in the cloud infrastructure industry. Two sources telling CNBC the regulator is expected to announce a proposed remedy to solve what it views as barriers to competition in the sector, which is dominated by cloud giants, including Amazon and Microsoft. Now, according to one of those sources, there's a chance that Google may be excluded from the scope of competition remedies, given its smaller size compared to those leaders, AWS and Microsoft Azure. Meantime, though, that's in the UK. Meantime, back home, as we reported earlier this week, the Justice Department now calling for Google to divest its Chrome browser to create what they're calling a more equal playing field for search competitors. A federal judge ruling in August that Google holds a monopoly in the search market, and now all this will go to court. There'll be appeals. This will go on for many, many years. And the question, of course, is whether Chrome taking Chrome out of the game changes the business materially or not.
It solves the problems that the government has with.
Right.
Would that do it?
I don't know. Look, as I said, I'm now using
AI. Is the
I
other
use
question,
Google. I've used Perplexity. I was using ChatGPT just yesterday.
This is another yesterday.
And so it's a different. I think it's a different game.
And look, I think the bigger issue for investors in this is what it forces management to do in terms of fighting this and dealing with it, because that was the question with Microsoft. Bill Gates has blamed the government's deep investigation into the company and all the dealings back and forth with why Microsoft dropped the ball on certain issues along the way, and said that's why they weren't able to.
It's a mind share story, because if you are the management of a company, how much time do you have to devote to the case? How much time do you have to spend with your lawyers? How much time do you have to start thinking about these issues? And even just what kinds of things you'll go off and do ambitiously. Meaning if there's a whiteboard of things you want to try to do.
This narrows that scope dramatically. And look, Microsoft's reaction to this has been to have Brad Smith, who's in Washington all the time, basically saying, yes, let us help you however we can, which is what they did with their last the Activision Blizzard situation too. So they changed their dealings with Washington. It's a major focus of how that company operates, and it's a reaction of what they dealt with going through this.
We'll see how a Matt Gaetz DOJ handles all these issues soon enough.
I'll be loving. You're saying I was loving
no, I'm
my
just
Google
saying.
Chrome?
Just even saying that is just.
My Google
I don't know
Chrome.
what his feelings are on these things. I saw Elon did say something kind of interesting yesterday. He's very.
The Google case, by the way, I believe started under
the Trump administration.
It did. But Elon, who says the real test of how good AI is that it will actually be able to predict the future. And you would think that, which is kind of, you don't think that immediately.
I thought we wanted them to be smarter than people, but who could possibly predict the future?
That's how smart it could be, which isn't. But the other thing he said was he's not a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, never felt that he's moderately libertarian. He just said he believes the government, when it does things, it's not great at them because it has no incentive to satisfy customers. And think about that. I guess that's what we've always said.
Right.
If you don't have people a profit incentive, which makes you watch everything and mind your P's and Q's.
Well, at some point we should talk about the DOGE, the op-ed in the Journal about DOGE, which between Vivek and Musk who wrote it. And it was fascinating sort of how they plan to do it and how they're really going to do it effectively through executive action. They're not trying to influence Congress on some of the big Medicare issues and Social Security issues, but they're going to be.
It's also fascinating who's coming around to where maybe this. I saw Ray Dalio, who would be the last person I would think who said, you know what, this is a big.
Look, nobody likes to see waste and bureaucracy. The problem with bureaucracy is the focus on processes, not the focus on outcomes. And so look, if you could apply a better way of
increase innovation for the whole country writ large, and it could be. I read something. I don't know. You see crazy stuff in social media. I might put it down for a while.
I think you should. I think it'd be good for your health, your mental health, as they say.
Right. President-elect Trump putting his team together, and the markets are focused on a potential Treasury Secretary pick. Joining us now with more, Jake Sherman, Punchbowl News co-founder and an ABC News and MSNBC political contributor. If Lutnick is in at Commerce to take care of the tariff stuff, can they now get a Treasury guy or gal who's not definitely sort of a good cop, bad cop? I mean, it's hard to get the markets to go higher if you're also totally on board with tariffs across the board, Jake. You know what I'm saying? So can they get someone like Warsh now? Would it be all right to do that, or do they need someone on board with some of the more controversial policies?
I'll say, Joe, I have conversations with the Trump transition team every day, people who are involved in the selections. I wish I could chart a graph for who is up and who is down in the Treasury Secretary realm. It's stunning how much this has shifted on a day-to-day basis between Lutnick, who's obviously now out, Scott Bessent, and now Mark Rowan of Apollo. I have a tough time of keeping track about who is up and who is down. I mean, there are knocks on all of these people internally. And what I would say is that very quickly, Trump needs to make this decision because this is just from a 30,000 foot point of view. He needs to find somebody that is easily confirmable because he has stacked up several people and is wasting a lot of political capital and a lot of energy in the Senate on nominations that are going to be extremely difficult or impossible to get through. So it needs to happen quickly, and it needs to be someone that has a good chance of getting through.
So it could be more than one. In other words, some people think that you get one that you have to pull, then that takes some of the pressure off some of the less controversial, but still controversial figures.
But here's what I would say, Joe, just on the tariff front. I don't understand why people think that this person, whoever he puts in Treasury, will have any leeway to make any policy decisions that are not straight out of Trump's head and Trump's mouth. I mean, this is somebody who's going to be executing Trump's agenda. So I don't know why the narrative is taking hold that somehow one is going to be better than the other on tariffs or on protectionist policy. It's just not reality. This person is going to have to work within the constraints of Congress and within the constraints of President-elect, President Trump, in enacting the agenda.
Then he's not going to pick someone who's really independent minded. He's already still thinking about Jeff Sessions back a couple of years ago.
Being
no, but he's not going
to.
Kevin Warsh is not going to. He would tell probably Trump, and there are people that tell Trump, no, if I disagree with you, I'm not going to do it. Then you're just thinking he wants a lapdog, and whoever says, yeah, I'll be a lapdog, that's who he'll pick.
I think that being in the president's cabinet in any administration is following his policy. I think I heard yesterday, for example, out of the Trump transition world, that people were souring on Mark Rowan because he has given over the course of his long time in finance a lot of money to Democrats, including $50,000 to Hillary Clinton in 2016. I don't know that is. I don't know that is.
Trump gave money to Hillary Clinton. Why is this a problem?
Of course, Andrew. And by the way,
that was even. They were at his wedding. I saw him there.
And by the way, guys, it's not unusual to have someone, as you guys know, in finance who gives money across the board. And in fact, I think that would be welcome in many quarters of Capitol Hill. Right. I don't quite understand that. So, and Scott Bessent is somebody who worked for George Soros, who the Republican Party has been spending months and months and years saying is the devil.
So what's your betting line now, Jake, then?
My betting line is that I don't listen to Polymarket or any of these stupid things at all, and I think that I think Andrew.
Maybe you should have for the election. Maybe you should have for the election, Jake.
I didn't have a prediction on the election because, Joe, I say the only way to make a wrong prediction is make a prediction at all.
Not a prediction. All right.
Okay, Jake, I have a different question, which is for those of us who read this Wall Street Journal op-ed. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at it.
I did.
Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy sort of laying out their aims with DOGE to make the government more efficient. Talked a lot about their efforts to do this, mostly through effectively executive action and sort of internal operations as opposed to anything that would require Congress's help. And I was struck by one sentence, and maybe you can explain it to me. They say that they plan to, quote, take aim at the $500 billion plus in annual federal expenditures that are unauthorized by Congress or being used in ways that Congress never intended. And then, interestingly, they specifically mention the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and Planned Parenthood. Now, I could be wrong, and you probably know way more about this than I do. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and there's a fair debate about whether there are people who want to fund it, don't want to fund it, but that was something that I thought was created by Congress in the late 60s, and that their budget is approved by Congress every 2 years. And so I'm trying to understand how you would cut that without Congress.
You can't. And let me just defend my honor for a second, Joe. I did not hope anybody won the election.
I know you're an objective journalist. I know.
No preference.
Absolutely. No, I know. I can tell. I can always tell when you're on. You've got no predilection one way or the other.
My predilection is breaking news.
That's too.
It. Breaking news. Okay, so they are not going to be successful, Andrew, in cutting. First of all, let's start with this. The drivers of federal debt and deficit are entitlements and military spending, period. You can cut around the edges. And by the way, they will be able to cut around the edges without Congress a whole host of ways. But there are some expenditures, low dollar expenditures, that are at agencies and various facets of the government that are not directly impacted and directly directed by Congress. I don't quite I think if they look for money that is going to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and Planned Parenthood, they will be wasting their time and not find much money. I mean, listen, the big picture here is Musk and Ramaswamy do have an opportunity to suggest things to Congress to cut. But Trump did not ask and has not asked to make their efforts statutory. There are ways that this thing could be successful. He could go to Congress and say anything and ask for a bill that says that anything that Musk or Ramaswamy finds should not be subject to the filibuster and should get an immediate vote in the House of Representatives. They have not done this. So it seems to me more like a blue ribbon commission or a vanity project than anything else.
But Jake, for example, if they were to say all employees should come back to the office, that was one of the things that they say in the op-ed. You would imagine there'd be some people who would resign. There was, by the way, an interesting piece in the Journal today about how there's a lot of people who are sort of working by, teleworking, if you will,
right.
And that so much of that started after 9/11 during the Bush administration, and that has made, these people were arguing, the country safer because in some cases you had things spread out, and therefore you had sort of double and triple backups, if you will. I just don't know how much. I mean, I hear you saying that you don't think much is going to happen, but if you told all the employees they had to come back to work, I assume you'd have a lot of resignations. I assume that you could cut some money. And by the way, even if you cut $50 billion, $100 billion out of the budget, I don't know if you think those numbers are even plausible. That's not $2 trillion, but nobody wants money to be misspent or wasted.
And there's a lot of money that is so. No, listen, the president does have the authority to order people back into the office. He does not need Congress to do that. He could force resignations in doing that. And I think that would be something that would, again, trim around the edges, but not trim in a major way.
Still better to see it operate the same way businesses do. It's just a reflection of what people who work in the private sector have to deal with all the time.
And by the way, that would help the economy here in Washington, where entire chunks of downtown Washington are uninhabited because the government is not back in and because corporations are not back in. But I will say this, they say they're going to put a DOGE official in every single office and department in the government. I mean, listen, maybe this is good, but at the end of the day, to make any real change, you need Congress. And by the way, government funding is going to be up in the next couple months. Every 12 or so months this happens. So they better get to work, because it's not going to be something that they could do on an ad hoc basis.
Okay. Jake, it's great to see you this morning. Appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, guys.
And bringing us the news as you always do.
Tease will be next.
More on those cabinet picks coming up next with Republican Senator from Wyoming, Cynthia Lummis, not Lummis, what she wants to hear from Trump's pick for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz.
I want him to tell me in his own words who he is today, who he used to be, and what he would do to run the department. All of those issues should be on the table.
This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernen, Andrew Ross Sorkin, and Becky Quick. Here's Joe.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, cue.
The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense minister, and a Hamas leader, all for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICC said there were reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and former Israeli defense chief Yoav Gallant were criminally responsible for starvation in Gaza and the persecution of Palestinians. A warrant for the arrest of Hamas leader Ibrahim al-Masri lists charges of mass killings during the October 7, 2023 attack on Israel. So they've got, those are the same, Netanyahu, and
It's fascinating to see.
it's one
Meantime,
word for it.
Bitcoin nearing $100,000 this morning. It has seen a big boost since the election as crypto supporters cheer Donald Trump's White House win. Bloomberg reported yesterday that the president-elect's team now looking into whether to create a White House role focused on crypto policy. And Trump himself reportedly spoke with Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong earlier this week. Joining us right now on what she sees ahead for crypto policy under Trump. Wyoming Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis, good morning to you. We've all been looking at this price, trying to understand why it's moving this way. It clearly has to do with this new administration and what comes next. But my question to you actually is what comes next in terms of policy that would manifest in a way that would justify the move in these prices.
I think the answer is twofold. One is there's an appetite now to do a statutory framework for digital assets. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and I have been working on that for years. We'll now move to that in early 2025 as opposed to later in 2025. The other thing is the proposal that I have and that President Trump has discussed about a strategic Bitcoin reserve or strategic Bitcoin stockpile, where the United States would acquire and hold Bitcoin for 20 years. Because of the way that Bitcoin has been appreciating since inception, this would be an asset that could help shore up the US dollar as the world reserve currency and serve as a reserve that could be used to reduce the national debt significantly. You know, the American people are still hurting from inflation, from high prices, and they want the national debt reduced. These are ways to do it with an asset that is immutable, can easily be held by the federal government in a variety of vaults, and that states can participate in as well. So this is the gold standard digital asset, and a strategic Bitcoin reserve is the way to embed it.
You know, we got off the gold standard a long time ago. My question is how much you would spend tax dollars at a time where we're talking about trying to reduce costs. How much would you spend on Bitcoin as part of this reserve?
We wouldn't have to spend any new dollars. We have reserves at our 12 Federal Reserve banks, including gold certificates that could be converted to current fair market value. They're held at their 1970s value on the books, and then sell them into Bitcoin. That way, we wouldn't have to use any new dollars in order to establish this reserve. The United States already holds over 200,000 Bitcoin in the asset forfeiture funds. So that would be the initial source of Bitcoin. So no new money spent on this reserve.
Senator, let me ask you a different question. Do you own Bitcoin yourself?
Well, I might. I had 5 Bitcoin and put them, along with other stocks I owned, into a blind trust. I hope they're still there in my blind trust, but it's blind, so I don't know.
What do you think about other members of either this administration or of Congress that may own Bitcoin? I ask because clearly one of the questions that invariably will come up is, you know, we were just talking to Mike Novogratz. He said, look, the whole administration, they're Bitcoin owners. Therefore, this is going to be positive for Bitcoin because they want Bitcoin to go up. The other side of some brains in the world hear that and say, well, that's a conflict.
Well, I get it, Ellen. Bitcoin is a commodity, so it's a lot like cattle. I own cattle, and yet nobody wants me to divest, thank God, of my cattle. So we have to remember a few things about Bitcoin that are unique. Bitcoin is legal tender in another country, and we need to recognize that as Americans. Bitcoin is a store of value and a means of exchange that has characteristics of a commodity. So it's very different from other assets. Quite frankly, I believe it should be okay for people to own Bitcoin without doing what I did and putting it in a blind trust, but to be inordinately careful. Since I was the earliest and biggest advocate for Bitcoin, it seemed to just help me credibly sell it to my fellow policymakers if I put it in a blind trust.
Senator, totally switching gears, we just had a story about the ICC, International Criminal Court, has now actually issued the arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu, along with the Hamas leader of the October 7th attacks. I know that Senator Thune a couple of days ago said that there should be a bipartisan bill to put sanctions on the ICC, which has done similar things historically, about American troops in Afghanistan and some of the detention facilities. But it's pointed out that Leader Schumer isn't doing anything at this point, and if he's not going to, then Senator Thune threatening. Do you think this? I just read it. I wasn't familiar with it, but in just reading it cold, it was like, really? The Hamas leader and the head of Israel? They're
in a war. This is a very different scenario. So I agree with Senator Thune that this criminal court is out of bounds. It's behaving in a rogue manner. We all know what happened on October 7th, and I support the right of Israel to defend itself from these horrific attacks, barbaric behavior by their neighbors, funded by Iran.
While we have you here, real quick, did you have any meetings yesterday? I know that Vice President-elect, I should say, J.D. Vance, taking Matt Gaetz around to meet with members of the Senate.
I haven't had any meetings yet. I expect that the appointees will be focused early on the committees of jurisdiction over their nomination. So I definitely want to have those meetings. I want to explore many issues with them, from how they would choose to run the department. In the case of Mr. Gaetz, I want to know how he would go about ferreting out the lawfare and corrupt behavior of the U.S. Department of Justice, in addition to exploring some of the behaviors that are alleged against him, and how he would respond to those kind of questions. So when it's
could
my
those things
turn,
be disqualifying for you?
I want him to tell me in his own words who he is today, who he used to be, and what he would do to run the department. All of those issues should be on the table when we finally get around to having our conversation.
Okay. Senator, great to talk to you this morning. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice to see you all. Have a great day.
Next on Squawk Pod, a conversation with the great one. Hockey legend Wayne Gretzky is still watching his sport, and he's pushing it forward with its youngest players.
I think our game is stronger and bigger, better today than it's ever been. I know as a fan, I love watching the game. These players are tremendous athletes.
You know, you miss 100% of the podcasts you don't listen to, so stick around through this break. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Joe Kernen.
Alex Ovechkin of the NHL's Washington Capitals closing in on the league's all-time career goals record. That stands at 894. Was set back in the 1990s by our next guest. Joining us now is four-time Stanley Cup champion Wayne Gretzky, the great one. Wayne, it's good to see you. I know you've watched for a long time. You know us. I know you from Michael Jordan's tournament. Your daughter was like 10 years old. We're getting old. Have you noticed that?
That's the first thing I notice every morning. No, but it's been a great run, and like you said, she was a young girl. Now she has two kids of her own, and life is great.
It's just shocking to me that I remember that down at Atlantis and seeing y'all. And whenever I've talked to people that have incredible records, it usually something like this does happen. I think a lot of the things, I don't know how many other records you got. Do you know offhand? Some 50 plus. This is a big one, but you probably, for the sport, are not that disappointed at this point that it could be exceeded?
No, not at all. People ask me about it all the time. You know, I'm good friends with Alex. The thing about the National Hockey League is when Bobby Orr retired, we kind of wondered what's going to happen. And then when Mario Lemieux retired, went, okay, what's going to happen to our game? And then along came Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin. And as they're getting a little bit older here, we're wondering, okay, now what's going to happen? And then we get guys like Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews and Nathan McKinnon. So the game is in a great spot. It's in a really good area. Our fans across North America and quite frankly, worldwide are getting bigger and stronger all the time because more and more kids are starting to not only watch hockey, but play hockey. But the players themselves, the guys, the superstars, are really, not only are they great players, but they're really good, special people. They're great for their communities and they're great for the game. And Alex is a special young man. Listen, I'm very proud of what I accomplished with the 894. Nothing can take anything away from that. But if, Alex has been exceptional for our game and for the Washington Capitals. I hope I'm the first guy to shake his hand when he does break the record, because people used to ask me all the time, is Alex going to break your record? And I would say, yeah, eventually, that's what happens. That's progression in our sport. And I can remember the day I broke Gordie Howe's record. I can remember saying to my dad, I said, this is a catch-22 for me because I idolized Gordie Howe so much. And he was such, not only the greatest player ever to live, but he was just such a gentleman. So I remember I said to my dad, I'm kind of embarrassed a little bit that I'm going to break Gordie's record. And he goes, you know what, you can't be like that. He said that, Gordie's very proud of what you accomplished. And he said, just remember one day when somebody breaks your record, you have the same dignity as Gordie Howe. And I remember I looked at my dad and I said, well, can I enjoy this for just a couple days?
Points and assists. Will that ever happen for you? You've got 50. This would be, you'd have 54 left, I think, if this one falls, right? All-time record.
That's okay. You know what? I never played and thought about the records themselves. I was lucky enough to play in some great teams in some great cities. I always tell people it's an honor and a privilege to play in the National Hockey League. And, I never really sat back and looked at it. Now, yeah, if I scored 2 goals that night, I wanted to get 3 and 4. But I think those are things that drove me. I wanted to keep playing. I wanted to be successful each and every night. And I said this before, we used to play exhibition games in places that didn't have hockey, like Miami and Tampa Bay, places like Kansas City. And now our game is growing and expanding. We're in Dallas, we're in Florida. Dallas has won a Stanley Cup. Tampa Bay and Florida both won Stanley Cups. So, when I was younger and we play exhibition games in those cities, I knew people may never see me play again another game. So I prepared in September the same way I would prepare for a game in the Stanley Cup playoffs in May.
Hey, Wayne, we had Gary Bettman on yesterday, and we were just talking about the enormous valuations of NHL hockey teams these days. The average NHL team now worth $1.92 billion, and it's just been on this wild ride. And I'm just curious what you think needs to happen for those numbers to continue on the upward trajectory, and sort of how the game can expand, what it takes. You are still the GOAT. You are still singularly that name that's associated with hockey, professional hockey. And obviously there's lots of other stars today in the game, but what it takes to sort of get to that next level.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think what Gary Bettman and the owners and the National Hockey League have done is exceptional. I also point to the players and the NHLPA and the partnership they have now with the league. But I think ultimately it's the responsibility of the current day players that they understand the scenario that they're in, that not only they're playing for their cities, but we're trying to expand and we're trying to make the game even that much bigger and better. I think over the years, we've gone from a defensive-minded league to a little bit more of an offensive-minded game, similar to that of basketball. People love to see goals. They love to see action. And these players are elite players. They're elite athletes. And I always say this to friends, the greatest thing about our players is not so much how good they are, but how great of people they are. They understand their commitment to going to schools and getting kids to play road hockey and ball hockey and outdoor rinks. And I know when I was in LA, gosh, I think when we got there in 1988, there was like 6 high school teams. And within 3 years, There was over 125 high school teams. So it's a matter of getting out in the communities and showing people the art of our game, the physical speed of the game, the beauty of our sport. And I think that that's what our players understand, that's part of being a National Hockey League hockey player. And I think our game is stronger and bigger and better today than it's ever been. I know as a fan, I love watching the game. These players are tremendous athletes. So, I think we're in a good spot, but we got to keep expanding. We got to keep getting more and more kids interested to want to play our game. Because if they want to play the game, then they're going to want to watch the game, whether it's on TV or going to the game. So it's just a partnership that the league and the players have to have on a continuous basis.
Wayne, really quickly, you came up with one of the sayings that I think has been more often quoted, not only in sports, but probably in business too. When you said you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going to be. Have you been surprised by how that is so all-encompassing, how familiar it has become with so many people, and you got a better saying for us?
Well, it's one of those things that when I said it years ago, somebody said to me, "You're so small, you're so much smaller than the rest of the players. How do you compete and how do you do what you're doing against these guys?" And I said, well, it's pretty simple. I have to use my brains out there, and I got to go to where the puck's going to be, not where it's been, and try to stay ahead of these guys. It was a matter of survival, but it is surprising. I don't think a day goes by that somebody doesn't come up to me and say, "I use your quote all the time, and thank you so much." But, it's an honor for me and a privilege, and I'm glad that people use it.
Wayne, I know you want to talk quickly about yard rink. I didn't even know you could do this, but your dad built a rink. I think that helped, obviously, to get to where you are. But it's possible with this company that you're working with, Boston-based company, it's possible to get your kid to build it in a backyard, right? Yeah.
Well, listen, for whatever reason, I fell in love with hockey and had a passion for the sport at a young age. And my dad would take me to the local park, and I would be out there for hours and hours. And at some point, he just said to my mother, "This is ridiculous. I'm freezing at these rinks. I'm going to build a rink in the backyard so I can sit in the kitchen and drink hot tea and watch my son skate for 8 hours." And that's how we started this. And so, again, when we're talking about expanding and growing our game, getting kids a chance to play is a big part of this. And the yard rink is pretty unique in the sense that you can build it as small as you want in your backyard, or you can build it to an NHL size. So it's pretty easy to put up. Cool. It takes about an hour to put up. It's exciting. So hopefully everyone's happy.
Great. We've got some business goes on. We got to get to where the puck's going. Pleasure having you on this morning. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
Okay, you too.
That's Squawk Pod for today. Thank you for tuning in. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 a.m. Eastern to catch all 3 hours of the show. You can get the best of that show every day, anytime you want, when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you're listening now. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow. Have a great day.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.